we acknowledge that, I guess sort of in hindsight, looking at our study, that it was a partial sample, and we heard this from the people that we interviewed, and also the statistics for this area show that, in fact, a lot of farms have been lost, and so by interviewing people who are currently farming, we're getting a very particular slice of what's happening in the county. And when we started this project, we would have said that people doing what you can see in these photos, that's farming. But it was interesting that coming into the interviews, a lot of people felt that they weren't farmers or weren't sure, and would right off the start say, I'm not sure if you should be interviewing me. I'm not sure I'm actually a farmer. And so I'll come back to that a little bit. This is just an example of some of the interview questions that we asked. We asked about 18 questions for farmers and less than that for politicians. This report is focused on the themes and the commonalities in these interviews. It doesn't capture at all everything that people talked about in the interviews. It's what was in common. And I will go through each of those in more detail. Also, one of the themes that I don't pull out as much, but that was there, was a really deep concern about sustainability that I think was present in all of these interviews, and also a concern about future generations in farming. So farming as an important way of life was one of the major themes. Almost everyone talked about this, and not just the importance of farming for their own families and for themselves as a way of life, but also the contribution that farming makes to the community more broadly. With this one, people also spoke about the importance of knowing what's in their food and of knowing where their food comes from. And while people spoke about it as being really important, there was also an anxiety that this way of life is getting harder and harder to sustain. Economic challenges was one of the biggest themes that we heard from farmers. People spoke about the rising costs of inputs for agriculture, so fertilizers, chemicals, also the cost of hydro affecting their ability to farm, changes in the price of land and also in taxes. And we heard concern about consolidation in agriculture, so from machinery to processing, and also consolidation in grocery stores, and that the changes in grocery store ownership was affecting people's ability to market their produce. So we heard a lot about the economic challenges. We also heard some people speak about what they were doing to sort of adapt to some of those, to the challenges, so focusing on niche markets and focusing on local markets. Environmental concerns. A lot of people talked about climate change. Some people spoke about changing weather patterns instead of specifically climate change. But the idea that the change in the weather is making farming more difficult, that it's less predictable and so harder to know what you're dealing with. We heard about changes in precipitation, and so extended periods of drought, and also that when rain comes, sometimes it comes as more of a deluge. So soils, in many ways, it kind of fits with the previous slide. But when people spoke about soils, they framed it differently. And they talked about what they were doing to deal with what they felt were depleted soils. So most people that we interviewed talked about the techniques they were using to try to build up soil, and the incredible importance of soil to farming, that if you don't have good soil, then you can't farm. Succession, new farmers, and retirement. When people talked about succession, it was very much linked to retirement, that in order to retire, farmers had to sell their land, or many do, and that there was concern that even if kids want to be involved in agriculture, they can't necessarily afford to buy the farm. And in terms of new farmers, a lot of new farmers talked about the importance of neighbors and the importance of mentors in supporting them in their ability to farm. Community, a lot of these subjects, there was this tension between celebration of agriculture, but also this angst that something's changing and that it's becoming much more difficult. And in terms of community, people talked about the importance of local vets, the importance of feed stores, but that there was also a change happening, and that new people are moving into the area who don't necessarily understand what's required for agriculture and aren't necessarily accepting of it. So often the same people spoke of celebration and angst. Regulations, there was a lot of a sense that people are sort of, small farms are being regulated out, I guess. People talked about regulations as often being geared towards larger farms. And it was interesting, actually, because a lot of people initially spoke of regulations as understanding the need for them and understanding why they originated, but being frustrated with the implementation of them and with trying to meet changing demands of regulations. So just sort of to sum up, I think through all of these themes, there was, again, that concern about sustainability, not just of the environment, but also of economics, and also the role that farming plays in supporting communities, and that community plays in supporting agriculture. And again, the tension between anxiety, and there was a lot of anxiety, and the celebration of agriculture. And then there was also the different framing, that where people have control, where they can make changes, they were. But there were plenty of things where they felt that it was hard.